Hi, everybody, and welcome back to True Confessions of a PK. I'm Karina.
I'm Karla.
And this is Confession 5. My battery is low.
My battery is low.
Yes.
Oh, wait, no.
Yes, my battery is low.
Yes.
Why are you repeating after me?
I thought that our person was telling me to repeat, but what they were saying was to speak louder.
Our person?
Anyways, yes. Our episode is called Our Battery is Low.
My battery is low.
My battery is low. Yes.
Essentially, what we wanted to do with this episode was discuss how when you are serving in church, you sometimes lose the balance between giving and receiving, right? And we're not talking about receiving from others. We're talking about receiving from God, right? So that's essentially what we want to discuss in this episode.
Yeah. We thought it was important to include this episode in our podcast because it's something that everybody goes through. And I think it's harder to say, I need a break, or I need, today I can't participate. I want to be able to receive today, than to, just participate.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I feel like it's like in life. You reach a point where you get, burnout, right? And so you're not functioning the same. You don't feel the same about whatever you're doing. And so even when you go to church, you get to the point where you're like, okay, right now I need to receive from God. I need to stop giving people, stop focusing on others, focus on myself, kind of recuperating yourself. And it's kind of difficult to do because I think there's this a bit of a fear, right? I usually serve, but here I am going to say I need to receive. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of
you're
contradictory.
Yeah, and it also leads to people speculating oh, you need to receive. Is it because
something's happening?
Yeah, if you're not okay, or are you going through something?
Yeah, and when in reality, it's church. You go to receive. Everybody goes to receive. And sometimes you can't give while you receive, Some people, in some situations, that's what you needed. You needed to give. And you receive from that. But it's not always the case,
I think there's also, a difference between receiving while you're giving and just receiving.
Yeah.
Because when you're receiving while you're giving, it's still, it's just it's the idea of I'm going to help out someone, right? Because it's a good thing to do. It's, helping someone out. Mm-hmm. And while I help them out, it's going to be a blessing to me,
Yeah.
Right? But there's a difference when it's just I need to help myself first.
Yeah.
Or I need to have this intimate moment with God because it's not in front of everybody, or,
Yeah.
I think there's a difference between that. But in my personal experience, we have mentioned before, we used to serve in a lot of different areas at church at the same time. And I think right before COVID, we were serving. It was probably the most I had served in my entire life, because I was serving in Sunday school, youth, worship, the worship team, dance team. We had been working on this Christmas pageant, mm-hmm. and then we did a summer school thing. Mm-hmm. And it was just a lot of
VBS.
VBS. And there was just a lot of things that I was putting myself into. I honestly enjoy serving. Yeah. I'm the type of person that if someone's oh, we need help doing this, who wants to volunteer? I would volunteer, or I would say I would be the one to come up with like these ideas and be like, we should have a VBS, or we should do this.
Like the homeless one.
Yeah, like the reaching out to the homeless community. And and that was something that we didn't have in our church before.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't know where it came from, like that, obviously from God, but like it came out of nowhere, like just building a team, trying to get everybody to donate stuff, so
like
that,
blankets and food, so that we could give to them.
And then we had to organize it to go reach out to them and give it to them, and we would do that every single year, which was a blessing, of course. And
it really was.
Honestly, like we would have experiences where in the future, I would walk to my job in that same area for where we would give out blankets and stuff to the homeless. And there was a homeless that recognized me, and he would make sure I would get to my job site safely. So he would follow me and he would just smile at me. But it's just like those things. No, but I mean, like, it's just those things that it's like, it was a blessing, and not only was it a blessing in that moment, but in the future, it became a blessing to me, because I didn't have to walk downtown all by myself. Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know, I'm just, just picture me walking downtown streets wearing a, ¿cómo se llama? Like the Mexican clothing. Yeah, like the typical Mexican, like
I don't know.
Like those skirts and the stuff they wear for fiesta time. Yeah. Like I used to have to wear that as my uniform for my job.
Does everybody have fiesta?
Or is that just a Texas thing? Look it up. But I would wear that, like the skirts and the shirts, to my job. And so I would just have to walk by myself. So having someone to walk me to my job site and make sure that I'm safe was a blessing for me. Yeah. So it's just all these things, they are a blessing, they were a blessing, and they still are, because I look back to it and I learn from it still, Mm-hmm. And there is this desire, like, I think every person's born with something, In my case, like, serving, it fills me up. It's like part of me, Yeah. Obviously, there's difficulties when it comes to serving. You face difficulties, and you face like moments that challenge you, and try to intervene between your servitude. But if you just allow God to help you get through that, then you see the beauty in it. Yeah. But yeah, so before COVID, I was at like my peak when it came to serving. And I didn't think I needed a break until COVID happened. And our family our church, we had to close. I mean, everybody closed down, right? But our church closed down, and we were serving from our house. So we would do like Facebook Live and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But it was just like in the morning for like an hour or two, right? And then it was over with. And then we would just spend time as a family. Yeah. And I think that's when I started realizing, like, I did need this moment. And not just... No, yeah. Cool. And not just, like, it's not a break, like, it wasn't a spiritual break, right? Mm-hmm. But it was a break of, like... A physical break, yeah.
And kind of mental at the same time. Yeah. Because, like, it's not in a bad way. But going to church, serving people, serving others, like, it can be draining. It can be very draining, which is why the episode is called My Battery is Low. Because that's what we're discussing, right? It can be very draining for a person. And it's like an everyday, like if you don't relate to serving in church, it's like an everyday. You go to work, you're busy doing things, you're busy at work, you're turning things in and everything. And when you get home, you're finally like, okay. But at the same time, you have all these things that you need to do at home also. And so at the end of the day, once you lay down, I mean, maybe you do get rest, right? but maybe like the next day you wake up and it's like, ugh, this all over again, you know? So it can be draining, and you just need that one day, like, go on a vacation. And that's kind of how this is. Like, not necessarily, it wasn't necessarily a vacation for us, right? But it was a moment for us to realize, like, okay, we've been overworking ourselves. We've been, like, we haven't focused on ourselves, you know? We haven't been able to receive from God. We haven't been able to have that intimate moment with God. And because of that, like, you don't get to grow if you don't have that intimate moment with him, if you don't seek him, if you don't look for him, right? If you're just giving and giving and giving, you're going to get to this point where you have nothing more to give. And if you get to that point, like, that's not where you want to be, right? You want to be able to continue to receive from God and to continue to give to others, because there is beauty in that, because you are serving others, because at the same time you're serving God. And in serving others, you are able to grow spiritually. You are able to grow mentally, because you're able to grow with wisdom, and you're able to see from different perspectives. You're able to learn from people's situations. There's so much in serving others, and there's so much in serving yourself also. And that's what
You just basically said what I was struggling to say in like a few minutes.
But yeah, like, it's important to serve others, but it's important to serve yourself. Like, if you have a dinner party, you're not just going to feed everyone else. You're going to grab a plate and you're going to eat some too, right? And I feel like a lot of times people forget that.
Yeah, it's like Martha, like in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Martha, not Martha May. That's a Grinch reference.
Martha May Huvier.
But Martha in the Bible, there's a point where Jesus comes to their house, and she's over there trying to serve everybody, trying to make sure everybody's has what they need and everything. At one point, Jesus is like, dude, come sit down. Like,
not like that.
But not like that, yeah. But it's basically, it's like, sit down and, like, let's talk, let's hang out. You know, like, I'm making
modernizing
it more simple,
it.
Yeah. But it's just something like that. Like, in our case, pastors' families, we're a bunch of Marthas. Like, we're always doing stuff. We're always making sure everybody has what they need. We're making sure the congregation is receiving what they need to receive. We're making sure that the worship team is organized. We're making and has everything set up for Sunday. We're making sure that, you know, Sunday school has what they need to be able to teach these kids and make sure that they're doing it efficiently. It's just a bunch of stuff. We're a bunch of Marthas that are always trying to make sure everything is working out according to what God wants, right? But at the same time, we lose our focus sometimes to what God wants from us.
Yeah.
And sometimes God is just like, just sit down and enjoy my presence. Like, that's what I want. It's that simple.
Yeah. I've always liked when, like, you're at church and they say, like, the table is served. Come and receive. You know, the table has been set up. Just sit down and enjoy the feast. Like, I've always liked that, because it's like, okay, like, I don't have to set up the table.
This isn't a pup block. It's
like the table was already set up for me, and it's not just for me. Like, it's for everyone. So that's not a worry that I need to have, right? And when you're serving, like, let's say in the worship team, the idea is help, like, to kind of give a hand to bring people to the table, you know? And that's so much less work than cooking everything up, setting everything up, you know? And so I've always liked the idea of when people say that, like, the table is set up, you know, go and eat. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Okay. But I understand what you're saying. Like God is the one that provides everything.
Yeah.
And we're just like his instruments, basically.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's just up to it. And at one point, even us, we need to take that moment to just enjoy his presence. I feel like that's something that I feel like a lot of churches struggle with, because there's this idea, this concept that church has to be a certain way, you know, like church has to be like you walk in, you get what you're welcomed into the church, and then you sit down, you give like announcements, or I don't know, every church does it differently, you know.
Yeah.
You do an opening prayer, and then worship team goes up, and then after that the sermon, after that just like a little moment of worship just to
Like close it.
And then, you know, tithes and offerings and all this stuff, right? And that's the conclusion of church. But it's like some churches are so set on like this time frame and this organization of like, first we need to do this, then we have to do that, and then we have to do this and that and that. And when sometimes God is just like,
no,
you don't have to do anything. Just walk in. My presence is going to do everything.
Yeah.
My Holy Spirit is the one that's going to do everything. I think it's so difficult for that. And not just in the area of church, but when you're serving too.
Yeah.
When you're serving, you're like, okay, God, what do I do? What do I do now? And now. And it's just like that. It's nonstop. And at one point, God just says, stop what you're doing, sit down, and receive. Yeah. Enjoy. Listen to my voice. You don't have to pray for anybody right now. Start praying for yourself. You know, like,
yeah.
You don't have to be. We're on the stage right now. I don't need you there. I need you down here with me. You know,
yeah.
like, I think we need to learn to listen to that, to listen to his voice. Okay, God, today, what do you need me to do? Where do you need me to go? Do you need me to just take a day for myself, for my family? And it's so difficult for a pastoral family to do that, because there's so many requirements, so many expectations. Like, people expect you to be there every single Sunday. If you're not there, it's like, where did the pastor family go? Like, where are they? Yeah. And it's like, oh no, they just needed a vacation. You know, they just needed a moment to themselves. And it's like, why? Like, we need them here, you know, and people need to recognize, like, just like you need breaks in life, the pastor's family needs a break time too, you know, to reconnect as a family, to I think this is the part where it's difficult, because every pastor's family is different. But in our case, before COVID, it was really hard for us to sit down and have dinner together, because we all had different schedules, and we were all serving in different areas at church. So some Saturdays when my dad had off, it was like, oh, well, we're not going to be there because we have youth, you know, or church after church on Sundays, when it was usually the only time where we had to get together as a family. It was like, well, we have to go eat with this family because there's something we have to talk with them about, you know, and it's just like, well, there goes our family time, you know?
Yeah.
Because I feel like family time is so important too, because it's important for your parents to know what's going on in your life.
Yeah.
Or for my sisters to know, hey, I'm struggling in this area right now. Or I feel like this is becoming a little too much. We didn't have that before.
It's like that Bible verse, my house and I, we will serve the Lord. That one. You should know how it goes, right? But as a family, like, you're serving the Lord, right? My family and I will serve the Lord. But it's also, and I. Not just my family will serve the Lord, and I. And that and
or
I. Or
just me.
And that and I can be seen as individually. But it can also be like, okay, not just them. Like Karla has mentioned in the previous episodes. It's not going to be just them. They're going to go, oh my God. Just them. They're going to go and serve the Lord, right? And therefore I'm saved. Like, no. It's an individual thing as well, you know? How did you word it?
But there's a beauty when you're working together as a
No,
family.
hold on. Yeah, but I was trying to say it how you would word it.
What?
Es que se me fue la palabra. Something. It was like something is not. Whatever. Okay, but you got the point, right? And so, like Carla was saying, but there's a beauty in working as a family, in doing it together. But I just wanted to make that point clear. Like, it's not just my family; it's also individual. Yeah. Sorry.
It kind of goes in hand. My family and I will serve the Lord. I think. I feel like that's where it can kind of go either a good way or a bad way when you're serving as a family at church, because if you're there's a lot going on, with every single one, and as a family there's a lot going on. So I feel like sometimes it's difficult as a pastor's kid, to experience that type of lifestyle, because sometimes it's like, well, I want to spend time with my parents. I don't need the pastor and his wife right now. I need my dad and my mom right now. And I feel like that's so important to know, because as we were serving at church, something that our dad would always tell us would be like, when we go to church, like I'm not like we shouldn't see each other as family members in a certain way. I don't want you guys to get confused. So like he says, like when we're having a meeting, like my dad's the pastor and I'm the youth leader, right? So when we're having a meeting, it's not like the way I should be. It's not a relationship.
It shouldn't be emotional ties.
Yeah. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. It's not an emotional tie. Yeah. It should be like a leadership tie.
Yeah.
Like, this is my pastor and I'm the leader of this group and I'm discussing things with my pastor, or my pastor is discussing things with the youth leader. Yeah. And I thought, and I still think this till today, like I feel like that's very important to have established as a boundary, because if we get our emotions, it's either lead by the Spirit of God or lead through your emotions. Yeah. Okay? Because if I'm going to be leading through my emotions, I'm probably going to cry or get hurt.
You're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah. Every single time my dad tells me, hey, as a youth leader, like you need to work on this area. Or as a worship leader, you need to do this, if I were to count every single time my dad had a discussion with me like that, it was so many times.
Like, you would be filled with hurt and anger, because as a person, that's what you feel.
Yeah. But learning to put that boundary really helped. And I'm sure I can speak for my family in this. Yeah. Because we all had different areas that we would work in. So sometimes we would have to discuss things or as leaders, and sometimes we wouldn't agree with the same thing, or we wouldn't have the same ideas or concepts, right? And so sometimes there were discussions or what differences when it came to stuff at church. But when we would come home, it was like, okay, set that aside. Yeah. This is our family time. You know what I'm saying? And I think that was just important when it came to how we would serve, because it's just like, it could either make your family or break your family. Yeah. When it comes to serving as a pastor's family, and those emotional ties that come with, okay, this is my sister that I'm serving with, But in that moment, you should see your sister the way God sees her. And in that moment, God was seeing my older sister as the youth leader. So I need to see my older sister. Okay, this is my sister, but this is the youth leader that God has placed in that moment. Yeah. So I need to respect her and talk to her the way it's meant to be, But when COVID hit and we just had this moment of like this break, yeah, I feel like our whole family just was able to breathe like this different air, and we came to realize, like, man, we were working really hard.
Yeah.
We weren't giving our each other that moment of like just embracing each other as family members, and just embracing each other individually with God.
Yeah.
You know, having that moment, that special moment where just like, I'm like, God, here I am.
Yeah.
You know? I'm not saying, we're not saying like serving is a pain, like don't serve at church. Definitely not. Like, we enjoy serving.
Mm-hmm.
But we do want to say like there needs to be a balance when it comes to serving at church and receiving from God. I think you do receive when you're serving, because at points like God is speaking to you and telling you, hey, I need you to pray for this one person and pray over this specific issue, right? Yeah, you're receiving that word from God, but it's a different form of receiving to saying, hey, just lay down on the ground and embrace my atmosphere right now.
Yeah.
And if you have never experienced that, I think you should totally do it. I think one day you should just lay down on the ground and just embrace God's atmosphere and his presence and just say, God, here I am. I just need a moment with you. It's so, people see it as something like, oh, you need a moment with God. Why? You're struggling? Do you need prayer? Do you need this? No. It's like, no, I just need a moment with God. I just need a moment with my Creator. I need a moment with his Holy Spirit. And that's normal. That should be normal. There's nothing, it shouldn't be connected to like, if you need a moment with God, it's because you're struggling. It's because you're in need of prayer. Like, no, I already said this. Like, God is enough. Your prayers are extra blessings. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just need a moment with God. I just need to build up my relationship with him, build up my I already said relationship with him, but
your
also
trust.
My trust with him, my friendship with him, just like a bunch of areas that I need to build up with him so that I can be able to, it would be easier for me to listen to his voice and recognize his voice. Or it's easier. It's like a relationship with anybody, honestly. When you're married with someone, I'm not married, but when you're married with someone, you still need date nights. You still need those moments to rekindle your relationship.
Or like with a friend.
Yeah.
You still like to go out with them and talk to them. It's different from being on the phone.
Yeah. It's just like that reestablishment, that moment of rebuilding that foundation, so that you know that your foundation isn't weak and that you don't have any cracks in that area. That's why it's important to have those moments with God. And so when we say like our battery is low, yeah, we've all gone through that. At one point we feel drained. At one point we're just like, I just need to take a moment to have that moment with God.
And like we said, like we've been through a lot right before COVID, but then after COVID, we had our own family situation, right? That took up a few years. And even that involved us serving. And that was draining. It was draining for all of us as individuals, and it was draining for us as a family. And so now we have this moment where we're just like healing, or like going with our podcast, right? We're charging. So it's just like that moment of, God, here I am. Like, let me receive from you. I'm open. Whatever you want, however you want to speak to me, like I'm willing to listen.
And I think like this time, what Karina's referring to is like, we had this moment where we were serving our grandparents for like 2 years.
Yeah.
And I think it's so special because it was a special time, because growing up at church, we would give a lot of our time, the majority of our time was serving people from our congregation. And even though our grandparents were part of the congregation, we never were really serving them.
Yeah.
You know, like we would pray for them and stuff like that, but, you know, not serving them in a way that you would probably like, in the way that we serve them these last 2 years.
Yeah.
Because these last 2 years, it was just like serving them and like making them dinner, making them food, helping them in every area that they needed help in, taking them to doctor's appointments, staying up late with them because, you know, they couldn't sleep, just serving them in that everyday life thing.
Yeah.
That for us, or personally for me, I saw this beauty in serving that I hadn't experienced before. Because I feel like growing up, there is a part of me that always longed to have a relationship with my grandparents that I would see in like other people have. I'm not saying that we didn't have a relationship with them, because we did, and it was a beautiful one, but we weren't able to give them as much attention,
like our full attention,
as other families were able to give theirs. And so growing up, I was able to see that, and sometimes I did long for that. I did long for just a Sunday just to spend with my grandparents completely, from the morning till the night, you know. So these last 2 years were a complete surprise and blessing from God, because we were able to experience that. I was able to experience that, spending the majority of my days from morning till night with my grandparents, and being able to serve them as a grandparent should be served. It's just a part that God started showing me. Like, I felt it more as a reward. For all these years that you weren't able to spend with them. I'm going to give you these 2 last years complete. And that was just like, even though it was a challenge, it was still like, thank you, God. Because I was able to experience these 2 full years of being able to serve my grandparents and just thank them for everything that they were able to do for me. You know, serve them the way they served me when I was little. That's just like something you can't get back. So I'm so grateful that we were able to experience that, to be able to serve them in that area. I feel like I mention it because right now, Karina said, we're like in this area of healing. You know, we lost both our grandparents, in such short period of time, but we're in this moment of healing. It's not a moment where it's like, you need God. Like, of course you need God. You need God at all times, you know, but people think like, because we're still healing, that there's something wrong with our relationship with God.
Yeah, like if we're holding it against him or something.
Yeah. And it's not the case. It's just, we need this moment between us as a family and God.
Yeah.
You know, we just need this moment.
Like we said, like, it's not just our family relationship with God, it's our individual relationships with God. So we're working on healing as a family, we're working on our family relationship with God, and we're working on as healing as individuals and our individual relationships with God.
Yeah, and it's like, if we need help, we'll reach out. Like, there's nothing, it's not like we're drowning in sorrow, because we're not. It is sad. If anybody loses anybody, you know, you feel the pain of loss. But we know that our grandparents are in a better place than we could ever be in this time. So it's not that we have anything against God. It's just that we need more of him as a family right now. Mm-hmm. And I think we need him in a secret place right now.
More intimate.
More
personal.
Yes. And so I feel like when people go through situations like that, and you had been serving nonstop before, of course there's going to be questions like, you know, but it's just like that form of understanding that right now we're building up our foundation again.
Yeah.
You know, every person that serves needs that moment with God. And we encourage you, like, if you're serving nonstop, just take a moment to just embrace God. The beauty in that intimate relationship is something so powerful. And I mean, we can see intimate relationships throughout the Bible while we read the stories, you know. David is a huge person that had a very strong, intimate relationship with God. Mm-hmm. And you can experience when you're reading Psalms, the book of Psalms, because you hear all these moments that he has with God, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful, you know. And he expresses himself with God in a way that a lot of people sometimes are like, you shouldn't express yourself like that with God. Like, personally, I have always had this relationship with God where if I'm going through something, I tell him, hey, I'm going through this. I know you know, like, help me get out of this, you know? Mm-hmm. And people are sometimes like, you shouldn't be talking to God like that. And it's like, no, you don't know my relationship with him. Like, you don't, I think you're seeing this in a different area. Like, I'm having an intimate relationship
They're
with
seeing
him.
it from an outside perspective.
Yes. And so I know that I'm not disrespecting him. I'm having a relationship with him.
You're being real.
Yeah. And I'm telling him, hey, God, you know that I'm going through this? Okay, let's get out of this together. So start helping me get out of this. Like, I'm going to put my part, and I know that you're going to do yours. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just this relationship. Also, when it comes to moments of difficulties where I feel lonely or where I feel frustrated, and I tell him, hey, I know you know how I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
Like, do something. I need you to do something.
And it's like when you're angry. Like, let's say you got into a fight with someone. If someone else approaches you right after and you're still in the heat of the moment, like, you're going to speak to them how you speak to them in the heat of the moment, right? But then you think back to it and then you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said it that way.
And I feel like sometimes...
And people don't think of that.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like people see me like a crazy person because I've had moments where I'm angry and like you said, in that heat of the moment, but I don't have a lot of friends. So the person that I go to is usually God. So I usually be like, can you believe them? Like, I'm having this conversation with them. I'm like, can you believe this? Like, how, like, can you think like them for a second? Like, I can't even understand how they're thinking right now. Like, are you kidding me? I have these conversations with him, and I feel like out loud. And I feel like other people are looking like, who the heck is she talking to? But also like this person's crazy. They need help. But it's just a relationship that I have. That's how close I have a relationship with him, that I'm able to express myself with him, and he knows my heart. You know, when I have moments of joy, I tell him, God, thank you so much for this, you know, like, thank you. But if you don't know what that feels like, you should definitely read the book of Psalms, because I feel like David is a great person to be able to use as an example, because he had his ups and downs, and you can read it through his words. Sometimes he's like, I'm in desperate need of you. Where are you, God? Even though he knows that God is there. Mm-hmm. But it's just like, I'm going through this. Where are you? I need you in this moment. And then there's moments where he's like, God, I give you all the glory. You're amazing. Thank you so much for everything that you have done. And that's the beauty of a relationship with him. An intimate relationship with him.
And it's like another part that makes it so beautiful is like, you're in the heat of in the heat of the moment, you're so focused on this, right? Like this, what your eyes can see. You're not focused on everything else. And the way God works isn't only for your eyes to see, right? It's in everything. It's all around you. So in the heat of the moment, you don't see everything that God is doing. You don't necessarily see him. And that's what makes people so upset, is they're like, where are you? Where are you? But then it's like, dude, turn around. Like, here I am. And the outcome, you will see how I worked, you know?
It's
I
like
think that's the beautiful
episode
part of
where
it.
I was like, God, why'd you let me do this?
Yeah.
But that's part of having a relationship with God, like, and I think that when you have a firm foundation in your relationship with God, then things are different, But I do think that when you're serving, there needs to be a balance, like you need to be able to have that place, that moment where you can it's just you and God. So that you can be able to grow in your relationship, and that will lead God to be able to, like, a easier flow when it comes to listening to the voice of God, receiving from God, and knowing what God wants from you, knowing what your purpose is, that's included in that. So I feel like as pastors' kids, there is a difficulty when it comes to that, because sometimes you're like, I guess kind of like what I said, like I would just listen to the voices of other people, their expectations, what is required from me when serving at church. And sometimes it's like, God, what do you want me? How do you want me to serve at church?
What are your requirements?
Yeah. What are your expectations? Yeah. And what if God's like, hey, I don't actually want you serving in the youth ministry. I want you serving in the women's ministry. Like, you need to be able to have that relationship with him to know really what your purpose is.
Yeah.
What season does God need you to work in this area, or
Yeah.
But there's a beauty to serving, and there's a beauty to having that intimate moment with God, and there needs to be that balance.
I think we said it all, Karla.
Yes. Heina.
So thank you guys for joining us on today's episode.
We really do hope that you guys are enjoying our episodes, and like we said, reach out to us, let us know if you have any recommendations of other future episodes, what we should discuss, any questions for us. We have our socials
at True Confessions PK or at true.confessionspk@gmail.com.
Yes.
So follow, subscribe, rate us on Spotify.
And on YouTube. Can you rate on YouTube?
No, you follow, and you subscribe.
Okay. And if you guys ever need a prayer, make sure to DM us.
Yes. And you can tag us on things that are relevant to True Confessions PK.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.